Sacagawea, the only woman on the Lewis and Clark expedition into the American West, is a mystery. She was the daughter of a Shoshone chief. It is not known exactly when she was born, but most sources say she was born in 1788. When Sacagawea was 10 years old, her Shoshone tribe was attacked in a Rocky Mountain meadow by a Hidatsa raiding party. The raiding party had guns, but her people did not have anything to defend themselves. She was captured and taken to a Hidatsa lodge, where she lived as a slave with several other captives. Sacagawea was eventually told that she belonged to a white man named Toussaint Charbonneau because he won her in a card game.
In 1804, she went to a small fort with Charbonneau that was built by a group of white explorers. This fort was located where the Missouri and Knife Rivers come together. The explorers had been sailing for days and decided to stay at the fort until the frozen river melted. They were looking for someone to lead them to the Rocky Mountains. Charbonneau heard about this and was very interested because he heard that they were going to pay the guide well, so he was interviewed for the job by Lewis and Clark. They were not overly impressed with him, but were very interested in Sacagawea. Although she was only 15 years old and pregnant with her first child, they were impressed that she was able to speak Shoshone and Hidatsu. She also grew up with mountain tribes that could provide them with horses and help guide them west. Lewis and Clark hired Charbonneau and told them that they wanted to take Sacagawea. On February 11, 1805, Sacagawea gave birth to their son, Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, while staying at Fort Mandan. Everybody called the baby Pomp. She carried him throughout the entire journey to the Pacific Ocean and back. The baby had a positive effect on the journey because native tribes that saw the expedition assumed that they were not part of a war because they had a mother and baby in their group, which caused them to approach the group in a friendly manner.
After the snow had melted in April, the men put their canoes back into the Missouri River. Sacagawea was a very knowledgeable guide for the group. She was able to identify tracks in the dirt and tell others if they were a threat to the group and help them gather food. On May 14, 1805, a large gust of wind nearly tipped one of the biggest boats over. Charbonneau was steering and turned the sail the wrong direction. Waves began to sweep over the deck and forced loose items into the river. Charbonneau started to panic because he was unable to swim. Then Sacagawea saved the day by jumping into the current and swimming after the maps, journals, instruments, trade items, and medicine that were swept into the water. She was able to retrieve most of the important articles. By the time the expedition reached the Rocky Mountains, the explorers were very hungry and tired. Sacagawea was excited to be close to her home and met up with an old friend named Jumping Fish. She earned this name because of the way she jumped through a stream to get away from the Hidatsa the day Sacagawea was kidnapped. Jumping Fish helped lead the expedition to the Shoshone camp, where they sat in a tent with the Shoshones. They all smoked pipes and tried to talk to each other while Sacagawea translated to everyone. She then realized that the chief of this tribe was her brother, Kamawat. He explained to her that their parents were dead and that only 2 of their brothers were alive.
The Shoshones gave Lewis and Clark a few horses to use while they crossed the mountains. Several people from the tribe decided to go along with them. When they reached the Pacific, the explorers spent the winter in the fort they built. As the expedition traveled east, Sacagawea learned how to communicate with Indians from other tribes whose languages she had never heard of. Sacagawea, Charbonneau, and Pomp parted ways with Lewis and Clark on August 17, 1806. They then returned to live among the Mandan tribe. Clark had a very hard time parting ways with the family and asked if he could take Pomp to St. Louis with him to raise as his son. Sacagawea replied by saying, "Maybe next summer," and kept Pomp with her. Clark gave Charbonneau $500.33 for his help on the trip, while Sacagawea received nothing. Clark wrote a letter to Charbonneau saying, "Your woman who accompanied you that long, dangerous, and fatiguing route to the Pacific Ocean and back deserved a greater reward for her attention and services on that route than we had in our power to give her."
There's not a lot of reliable information available about Sacagawea's life outside of the Lewis and Clark expedition. The family moved to St. Louis for a little while, and then Sacagawea and Charbonneau left for Fort Manuel while Pomp stayed in St. Louis with Clark. Sacagawea and Charbonneau eventually separated while he went off on further travels. Pomp later became a guide for Western travelers. There are various opinions on Sacagawea's actual death date. One missionary wrote that she died a very elderly woman in 1884, but a more detailed journal of a trader claims that she died on December 20th, 1812, of putrid fever, which is also known today as diphtheria. She was 25 years old around this time and left behind an infant girl. Clark also wrote that Sacagawea was dead by 1828. Sacagawea has left behind a huge legacy and has been memorialized in many different ways. There are more statues of her than any other woman in the United States history, even though nobody knows what she really looked like. She was portrayed on the United States postage stamp in 1994, and in January 2000, the United States government released a $1 coin honoring Sacagawea efforts in the exploration of the West. Where would we be today without Sacagawea?